As we transition from fossil fuels, what happens to small local communities?
John, I should point out you're from the Upper Hunter, where the Liddell coal-fired power station closed earlier this year. What impacts that had locally?
It hasn't had a major impact in that there's a lot happening in the Hunter anyway. There's the conveyor belt of coal is still delivering coal to Newcastle. We at Arts Upper Hunter are running a program called Liddell Works, which is 16 artist residencies at the power station as it closes. It's marking the transition. It's marking the legacy, the double-sided legacy of the Liddell power station. Amazing workplace, CO2 into the atmosphere, all those sorts of things. We're running workshops, community events, because we see this is the time when we should be asking that really important question. So we're transitioning from coal. What's that future going to look like? What's this community, that community, this community that's been involved with power generation or coal? What's that going to look like? And what can we do now to put in place some of the building blocks to make sure those communities are vibrant, are vital, that they have opportunities built into them as well? And there's, you can have a big infrastructure, but you can also have better education system, creativity brought into the heart of the debate.
John, it's a very good question. Thank you. Nicki, let me go to you on this. Are we getting it right when we talk about transitioning coal communities?
Yeah, look, I think we're having a lot of really intelligent conversations, and that includes the Hunter region. The New South Wales government has done a lot of work in looking at what the transition pathway might look like, looking at what are all the strengths of and opportunities for that region, the different sectors. Obviously, agriculture is incredibly strong, tourism as well, renewable energy zones, trying to work out how you patchwork in the new sectors of our economy in the older sectors that are inevitably going to disappear over time. But I just say we have done it badly. I think we haven't done it well in the Latrobe Valley, for example. There's some serious problems there where there was some planning, but it was perhaps a little bit optimistic in what they could and couldn't achieve there. But it's been done in other parts of the world and done successfully. And Australia has done this many times before. We used to ride the sheep's back. We used to make cars in this country, and we used to have textile factories in this country. And every time we changed tariffs or we did something new that let an industry disappear, everybody said, it's like, what's that poem, Hanrahan, we'll all be ruined. But we weren't. In fact, we found new ways to do things. We're a much more services-based economy now. And services can actually be done more flexibly in different regions. What we do need to do, though, is to make sure that we have the right infrastructure. So Upper Hunter particularly, making sure you've got really good roads so that people can get to and from if they need to, and trucks to and from the city, hopefully electric trucks, of course, but also communications. I mean, that is a huge problem at the moment. Still in lots of regional areas, we don't have great NBN connectivity. So if you get the infrastructure right and you support, and you're totally right around skills, we need to match those. But we absolutely can do this. And I know the Climate Change Authority is about to do some modelling around the impacts of the transition and what that might mean for sectors and regions. So I think we are having the conversations. We just need to make sure we're having them at the right speed.
Chris Bowen, what do you say to that?
Well, thanks, John. It's an enormous challenge, but it's also an enormous opportunity. And as Nicki said, we've been through this before. You probably lived through the closure of the Newcastle Steelworks a few years ago, and everybody said that was the end of Newcastle. With the right policies, the right investments and the right framework, Newcastle didn't look back. As tough as that was to manage, create new jobs and help people in the transition. And that's exactly what we're doing. We've set up a new government body, and we don't do that lightly. Like, we don't set up many new government bodies. We've set up the Net Zero Authority just for this task, to focus like a laser on areas like the Hunter, the Latrobe, Central Queensland, etc. Recognising that there's enormous opportunities. The renewable energy and the energy of the future will be made in those regions. The regions that have powered Australia for so long will power us for generations into the future, and indeed power our region and export renewable energy. We'll always be an energy country, and that energy will always be made in those regions, but the energy will change. It will become renewable. That requires management. That's why the Net Zero Authority, which we've set up, chaired by Greg Conway, who knows the Hunter very, very well, is they have the job of identifying the obstacles to investment in regions like yours, knocking them over, working with me and Ed Husick and the other ministers to knock them over, to work with communities on building the skills necessary. It's not just about retraining. Retraining's got a role to play, but more identifying the skills, working with individuals, working with communities. There's great work being done in the Hunter. You're all doing great work. The Hunter Jobs Alliance, I give them a shout out. It's doing excellent work, working with government, managing this transition.
Let me just jump in there. Allegra Spender, you're one of those who wants to move faster in getting away from coal-fired power. What do you say to communities like that directly affected?
Look, I think it is a difficult transition, and I take my hat off to you and your community for what you're doing and the imagination and resilience you're putting together to go through this. We can't change that we need to go through this transition. The whole world does, right? Like we have to look that face that straight on.
It's harder in some communities.
It is, and I think that's the truth, is that Australians are good at coming together and saying, if we have to do something, pulling together, but then saying how to make sure that the communities that are most affected get supported. And so I absolutely wholeheartedly support, the actions doing that, because, it will affect different communities differently, but we just need to make sure that we all can get through this and to the other side.
Ted O'Brien?
Look, I think it's the same regional communities, John, who are seeing industries close, baseload power stations close, that are being asked to host tens of thousands of kilometres of transmission lines. That the notion of installing 22,000 solar panels a day, 40 wind turbines a month all the way through to 2030, predominantly in regional areas, it's regional Australia that's feeling it the most right now. I take Allegra's point about the need for speed, and I take that seriously. But if you go again and learn from international experience, and you look at the top 10 case studies for speed to decarbonise a grid, 6 of those 10 did it with zero emissions nuclear energy. The speed at which you can do it is faster with nuclear. Another 2 were hydro, another 2 were wind, by the way. And so where speed is key, well, nuclear has to be on the table. And I learned from Wyoming in the United States earlier this year. This is a coal community. One of the reasons they're excited about their retired coal-fired power stations going to nuclear is the workforce moves over. By and large, the exact same occupation, which means they don't need to move home. They can stay together. And as one person said to me in Wyoming, and a similar thing was said to me in Ontario that went from coal to nuclear, you look at the coal-fired power stations, you look at the car parks, and they looked over at wind farms and solar farms, and they said, I can't see the car parks. And for me, that went to a point, because when Liddell closed, the majority of that workforce was either moved to another coal-fired power station, or they finished their job, so they made redundant. There was only a handful that found jobs in the clean energy system, right? So there's a lot to unpack in that. And I'm pro-renewables, by the way. This is just all about we need all of the above, we need a mix.
But clearly pro-nuclear, as we've heard.